The Spinoff Podcast Network.
Love news but find keeping up a bit overwhelming? Well, Newsable is the answer. It's your daily fix of everything worth talking about. I'm your host, Imogen Wells, and in about 15 minutes, I'll bring you what you need to know from Aotearoa and around the world and explain why it matters. Newsable tackles the big stuff without taking itself too seriously. Listen and follow wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is brought to you by SparkLab, offering inspiration and practical advice to help businesses find their edge. To hear more about SparkLab, including details about the latest events, workshops, and business tools, visit sparklab.co.nz. And now, here's your host, Simon Pound.
You're listening to Business is Boring, a podcast that reckons it's anything but. Business is Boring is made by the Spinoff with help from Callaghan Innovation, New Zealand's innovation agency. Here's your host, Simon Pound.
Hello and welcome to a very special business chat to mark Techweek and the Hi-tech Awards that land at the end of the week. Techweek is a festival of innovation, a meeting of the varied ecosystems in tech, and a very good time. We're chatting with two of the speakers in this big week of talks, panels, meetings and connections that's happening May 20 to 26. So that's next week if you're listening to this close to the day it comes out, and it's across the whole country. If you jump on techweek.co.nz, see if there isn't something happening close to you, and even if not, there's heaps of live streaming and ways to get amongst online. We're joined by Amber Taylor, CEO of Ara Journeys, who are a finalist for Māori Hi-tech Company of the Year, and she's speaking on a panel on celebrating Māori innovation. And also by Jonathan Miller. He's the Group Manager for Future Insights at Callaghan Innovation, and he'll be on a panel looking at 2019's biggest technology trends. To find out about them, the week, and what they'll be chatting about, thank you, Amber and Jonathan, for joining us now. Kia ora, Māori.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Hey, so first up, Amber, thanks for being here. Tell us about Ara Journeys. What is it? And you've got this amazing mission about making a distinctly Māori tech company. How does that work?
So ARA stands for Augmented Reality Applications, and our focus is on creating AR gaming that helps connect people to the land and to the Indigenous stories that are related to our area. We talk about Māori in the sense that we want to start at home first. So we want to look at our stories, our iwi stories, our people kind of thing. But since we've been developing ARA, we've learnt that this is something that our Pacifica neighbours are interested in also. So we do say Māori, but we also mean Indigenous cultures worldwide.
And what is the technology that you're melding? Because there are these wonderful kind of augmented reality app-driven experiences where you can kind of interact with the environment, with the land, with the whenua in ways that you normally can't, and tell really interesting stories.
Yeah, so we're using AR purely because of the component that we can overlay the digital and the physical worlds together, and we kind of find that that sparks imagination, creates curiosity. I think the really great thing about AR is the stories are short, so the stories are short, so the attention spans we're really capturing the attention span of kids, and we're kind of a safe platform for iwi to share their stories, so they don't have to give us the full in-depth story that's related to their whakapapa, to their area, but we can retell parts of it and create curiosity amongst our users and encourage them to go out and find out more and visit the region and learn more.
And tell me, what kind of experience do people have when they download and use the app? Because you have kind of an avatar leading people in some of your apps, don't you?
Yeah, so we have Manu. Manu's our bilingual little Māori boy that takes you on a journey through the environment. So connection to environment is really important to us. That for Māori, that's our whakapapas woven through it. When you download the app, open it up, and that you can bring him to life. So you hold it in a certain area. We use geomarkers, geolocation. Hold him up and he'll tell you the story about that area and maybe about some of the native life that was once there, how Māori maybe used the awa for fishing or for harvesting from the land.
That's so cool, and such a kind of like an evolution in storytelling, which is kind of, I guess that's a link in a long storytelling tradition.
Yeah, we've found with the storytelling side of it, it's not just Māori that are interested. Like there's a whole range of tourists that are coming in, and often they're coming straight into Auckland Airport looking for a cultural experience, but they're going straight to Rotorua because, you know, that's the one that's most advertised on TV. They're totally bypassing the rich stories of South Auckland, the Punui Stream, Stonefields, which is right next door to the airport. And those are the stories that we want to kind of highlight and drive traffic to, because it doesn't only benefit the iwi in that area, but it benefits local business.
Yeah, and that's such a genius way to do it. Like, I can't understand why in Auckland, with so many maunga, we don't have like a recreation of a pā site or something, you know, to really tell some of these amazing stories of the history in Tamaki Makaurau. But to be able to do something without having to build physical infrastructure by laying that kind of digital overlay, you can tell those stories everywhere.
Yeah, and that's something that's really important to us as well. We don't want to, obviously we want to look after our environment as much as we can, so we don't want to go and put these builds up that are going to affect the natural environment around us, because that kind of misses the point. And then using the gamified experience or the gaming that we're combining with AR, it's helping us drive the traffic across the country, highlighting different areas and just getting people to reconnect.
Yeah, I'd love to come back and have a little chat about like some fascinating things that are happening and that kind of mapping and telling people those stories, especially in tourism, where you know, like the actual stories of tourism, if you go to, say, Hotwater Beach, it's just a car park and a beach. There's very little storytelling, and there's such an opportunity to build so much more on. And all the way through the Waikato, there's all these kind of like famous sites of history, and you just drive past them at 100 k's an hour. It's bananas.
Yeah, and that's the stories we want to capture. So there are Māori stories that you can download, read about, go to the library and learn about, but we want the ancestral stories. We want the ones that have kind of been passed down the generations, but we're losing because, you know, we're an ageing population. Our tipuna are dying and our kaumātua are passing away, and with them goes that knowledge. And I always joke about this across the family. It's like you can go and ask your aunties and your cousins and they can tell you the stories, but depending on which one you ask, it kind of becomes Chinese whispers. So you never have like this one true record, and that's kind of what we want to capture with our platform.
Ah, that's so cool. And so I'll bring nice to meet you. I'll bring Jonathan in here. Hey, man. Hey, tell me about your background as well, because your role now with Callaghan is kind of a bridge between business and the entrepreneurial part of the business sector, you know, people making and innovating things. And you came from that part, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, I've sort of always been interested in technology. I grew up on a kiwi fruit orchard. As a teenager, I built a wind tunnel on the family table to test a new artificial shoutabout that I was trying to design. And so I think I've always enjoyed that. I went through engineering and started work at Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, working on CPAP blowers. That's a device that treats obstructive sleep apnea, or sleep disorder. And then I went on my OE, and sort of that's where I discovered the world of startups, because I was working for a tech company based in Cambridge in the UK, and really enjoyed that kind of environment. But yeah, when I came back to New Zealand, I think I discovered that there was this whole area that gets called technology transfer, and it's kind of like how do you take technology from an idea and into commercialization, and I got really interested in that. So that's when I started to think, okay, where could I try that out?
And that is such an important thing, isn't it? That area of commercialising research. And having worked at some of, Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, very large company, I think almost still underknown here for just how big a player it is in the international kind of breathing health space. But then the small companies having to try and work to commercialise without that infrastructure and without that experience is a real hole.
Yeah, and that was a really stark kind of experience. Like I went from feeling like quite a sort of small cog in quite a large machine to, and in the startup that I was in, one of two electronics sort of design engineers, and you really feel like your decisions are affecting the direction of the company, and that was actually quite exciting. And you got sort of stake in the company as well in terms of shares in the company as part of your package. So yeah, that was really quite cool.
And so how did you move from being on the front line of trying to commercialise the tech to then going, okay, well, there are these government organisations, there are these people who are trying to help these little companies. How can I be a bridge and do the tech transfer piece?
Yeah, so I got hired by Industrial Research Limited, which was one of the predecessor companies of Callaghan Innovation. And that organisation had like over 200 scientists and technologists and engineers, really, really smart people and deep kind of knowledge in these areas. And my job there was to help understand what it is that those people could do and why it was important for New Zealand businesses, and then talk to New Zealand businesses about what these scientists and technologists and engineers could do. And I sort of felt like my role was almost, I sometimes say at barbecues, like translating between business and technology. And for some reason, I just really enjoy that challenge.
And I guess it is a translation, isn't it? Because they're dealing with like often entirely different timescales and entirely different motivators. Like a science process will take as long as it takes to get the right result, and business has the times that they have to ship things and all the rest of it. And I imagine there's a real interesting space in the middle of that. Yeah, and at Callaghan Innovation, we've still got that capability of scientists and technologists, and they're a lot more commercially focused, and the kinds of people that we have really kind of passionate about solving business problems. But even so, it's just, I do feel like there's always that kind of tension there, actually. And we hear about the stories once they're successful because there's so much secrecy and things having to stay private and confidential and undercover. And so for every rocket lab that, you hear about, there's about 50 things, boiling away on the back burner, aren't there?
Yeah, that's true, and that's one of the really exciting things about my job. And even hearing Amber's story today, just really exciting, because I know a bit about augmented reality and the possibilities, and it's just always really neat to find stories of people kind of finding these interesting value propositions and then taking them to market, in the way that Amber's doing.
So how does, let's say you are an Amber and you are the CEO of a really cool company that has really leading edge tech, how do you get involved with someone like yourself to help navigate the process?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of ways. You can get in contact with Callaghan Innovation. We've got a lot of people whose job it is to work with businesses, and we've got a range of skills that we can and programs that we can bring to bear. I also kind of think like there's a wider ecosystem as well, and it's really useful to get along to meetups in the area that I'm interested in, kind of emerging technology. That's quite a great way of getting to know, what is artificial intelligence and what can it do and what can't it do. And so meeting practitioners is a really valuable thing to do.
Cool, and let's talk about your panels at Techweek, which is happening 26th of May. Amber, tell me about the panel you're on, which is so cool, Celebrating Māori Innovation.
Oh, don't you love that title?
Yeah.
I love that title. I think working in this space in this current time is really exciting. We've got we're hearing more about Māori innovation that's taking place across the country. We've got some great leaders kind of paving the way for us that we can follow in their footsteps, like Ian Taylor's, what he's doing with ARL, or even what Robbie Hollis is doing with his knocking down the New Zealand tall poppy syndrome. I think that's really impacting or really helping these stories come to life around Māori innovation. I'm also really enjoying the collaboration and kind of like the transparency between the startups in this space, because we're all trying to work together to help each other. And it comes back to that that saying that we're all in this together. He waka ike noa, he waka ike noa. Yeah, we're all in the same boat together, so let's work together and see what comes about. And
Jonathan, tell me about your panel, where you're doing predictions for 2019, which predictions can be a dangerous business.
Yeah, that's true. So we're covering off emerging technologies for 2019, and we've sort of... Yeah, it can be a dangerous business, but I mean, that's not a reason not to do it. And really what I'm trying to do is talk about some of those emerging technologies and why they're important for New Zealand and mission-critical sectors. So I'm covering artificial intelligence and space and data science and those sorts of technologies.
What's happening in the space sector? Because, as we mentioned, like the rocket labs get so much of the attention, but there's heaps happening there, isn't there?
Yeah, there is. And I think I see this really huge opportunity for New Zealand here. Everybody thinks space is about sending rockets up, and that's a pretty important part of it. But it turns out there's a lot happening, and there's this trend called the democratization of space. What it means is, even sort of 5 years ago, if you weren't kind of NASA or the Russians, it was really hard to get access to the data from space. But now, thanks to companies like Rocket Lab, a lot of that data is much, much more accessible. And this is sort of combining with another thing where there are new sensors that can be sent up into space, and those nano satellites, really small satellites. And there's a new technology called synthetic aperture radar. And why it's important is it can see through clouds. And, for the Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud, that's a pretty big deal, because otherwise, quite often we can't see from the land from space, but now we can. And I'm just seeing lots and lots of interesting applications for New Zealand that could really change many sectors. And actually thinking about Māori Innovation, there's a company called Waiora Pacific, and this is a Māori company that's in this area using satellite data to really understand how land is being used and to help iwi that are trying to make decisions to affect town planning decisions, like looking at how this water might affect this wahi tapu area and so on. So visualization tools that can help people make better decisions about the land.
That's so cool. And when you have one of those big companies that kind of trailblaze for a whole industry, like Xero did with SAS in New Zealand and Rocket Lab is in space, it's so cool when that ecosystem can build up around it.
Yeah, that's true. And I feel like we're at the early stages. That's why I'm so excited about it. When I go and talk to some of these scientists that were working on areas like, for instance, how do you protect our exclusive economic zone and the fisheries, using artificial intelligence and space data to tell, for instance, that there's illegal fishing happening in this area. What I see is some interesting science, but I don't really see many of the entrepreneurs and innovators kind of connecting in with that. So that's why it's an interesting opportunity.
Yeah.
And you mentioned there the AI, which is another kind of like, I guess, a huge area that you follow and help to foster with your work. And it's so hard to kind of tell some of the stories of AI because, it takes so much understanding often for the press, and there's not room for kind of, the full explanation of how things work. But it's a really healthy sector here, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is actually. And there are some fascinating companies. A really interesting example is Thematic, Aliona Medlin's company. And so she's using artificial intelligence, a particular type of AI called natural language processing, and that's about automating that process of customer feedback, so you don't have to have a human reading through and deciding whether that verbatim feedback was positive or negative. But there are lots of, I'm quite excited about how AI might impact on health. There was an interesting startup out of Stanford University called Wobot, and I just about fell off my chair when I heard about this. They are deploying cognitive behavioural therapy, which is evidence-based counselling, over chatbots, and it's working. Like, the students that are doing it are getting 20% better mental health.
Wow, by the chatbots talking them through when they're needing to talk to someone, but being an AI.
Yeah, they're chatting to a chatbot and they're receiving a form of cognitive behavioural therapy.
Yeah.
And that's remarkable, both from the fact that they were able to make it work and also from the fact that people would actually want to engage with counselling on a platform like that.
Yeah. And with the week, Techweek, there are hundreds of panels, stuff happening up and down the country, which is so cool. What's another? Have either of you got a pick for something else to catch this next week?
I'm really looking forward to Te Wāhiki, which is taking place in Lower Hutt. It's around Invent the Future. There's a lot of amazing companies that are going to be showcasing there. Soul Machines are down there, which are always exciting to see what they're working on. And there's an AR sandbox demonstration happening. And then we'll be running Manu down there as well.
And I reckon people should check out Techweek TV. There are a whole lot of interesting interviews and panel sessions. One in particular on space meets the agri-tech sector, which I reckon will be pretty interesting.
Cool. And they're doing live things, and you can watch them on demand too through the Techweek website. You'll see
that's right.
Jake and Sian running those fantastically. Yeah. That's so cool. Well, thank you for coming and telling your stories today and about the panels. We'll look forward to catching you at Techweek. Thank you, Amber Taylor and Jonathan Miller.
Kia ora.
Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you, Tina Tiller, for producing. And thank you very much for having us along in your ears. Cheers.
You've been listening to Business is Boring, presented by Simon Pound. And brought to you by the Spinoff and Callaghan Innovation.
From the Spinoff Podcast Network, that was Business is Boring, brought to you by SparkLab. Make sure you're following Business is Boring wherever you get your podcasts. And for more information on SparkLab, visit sparklab.co.nz. Ready to rediscover the joys of cycling? With over 300 kilometres of cycle paths across Tāmaki Makaurau, jumping on your bike and going for a ride is such a fun way to discover the city from a different perspective. Cycling is getting more and more popular across Auckland, so now's a great time to join the hype and give cycling a go. Head to at.govt/cycling to find your nearest cycleway today. The Spinoff Podcast Network.